This is a satellite photo of the largest electronic spy operation in the world. A facility run by the NSA, the super-secret National Security Agency, a key place in the U.S. efforts against terrorists.
We were listening to Iraq, Iran...
A trained Arab linguist, Adrian Kinney worked there for 2 years after being called up as an Army reservist in 2001.
We were put in charge of a new system that concentrated on satellite phone communications in the Middle East.
David Murphy Falk was a Navy Arab linguist who worked there intercepting phone calls from 2003 until November of last year.
You go to work, clock in, sit down, listen to phone calls in a foreign country, take a smoke break, have office gossip, just another job, actually.
The NSA facility is at Fort Gordon in Augusta, Georgia, in a nondescript building surrounded by barbed wire. Back Hall, a former classroom building. This is the heart of the controversial U.S. terrorist surveillance program, in which President Bush approved intercepts of suspect overseas calls coming into the U.S.
I want to make it clear to the people listening that this program is limited in nature to those that are kind of known al-Qaeda ties and or affiliates.
But now, both former intercept operators tell ABC News that is not always true.
I knew that, we were doing something we shouldn't have been doing.
Adrian Kinney says she listened to hundreds of Americans in Iraq simply calling their families.
Americans in the Middle East calling home.
Oh, most definitely. Type of conversation like personal, private things with Americans who are not in any way, shape, or form associated with anything to do with terrorism. It was just personal conversations that really nobody else should have been listening to.
And you were?
And we were. Sometimes it was really, fascinating or hypnotizing to be listening to people in this country. It was a very...
But you're listening to fellow Americans.
Awkward, yeah.
Did you feel that it was wrong?
Oh, most definitely I did.
But the law is very specific. And President Bush has reassured Americans again and again.
It's a phone call of a known Al-Qaeda suspect, making a phone call into the United States.
I would say that is completely a lie, because we were definitely listening to Americans who had nothing to do with terrorism.
Did you just pull the plug and say we shouldn't be listening to this?
I wish that I had, but I didn't.
Intelligence officials say Kinney was under the control of the Army, not the NSA. But she received an NSA Joint Service Achievement Medal in 2003, at a time she says she was listening to all those Americans, members of the military, journalists, and aid workers.
And yet, instead of blocking these phone numbers, we continued to collect on them. These were really just everyday, average, ordinary Americans who happened to be in the Middle East, in our area of intercept.
David Murphy Falk tells a similar story about what he saw and heard from colleagues during his 4 years at the NSA facility in Georgia, where he got high marks on NSA job evaluation forms.
At times when I was told, hey, check this out, there's some good phone sex, or there's some pillow talk, pull up this call, it's really funny, you'd go check it out, and it'd be some colonel making pillow talk.
And you would listen?
It was there, stored the way you look at songs on your iPod, and you can pull up a song on your iPod. You would look at your screen, and there would be a list of calls, and
that number would get passed around. You listen to this call, you'll hear some phone sex, you'll hear some pillow talk.
Right.
And you did?
Yes, I did.
How do you feel about that?
I feel that it was something that people should not have been doing, including me.
The truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
The accounts are sharp contradictions of what then NSA, now CIA Director General Michael Hayden, specifically denied before Congress.
What's your purpose of this warrantless surveillance program? My gosh, are you just doing this because you just want to pry into people's lives? What's the purpose, if you can succinctly tell me that?
No, sir, and it's not for the heck of it. We are narrowly focused and drilled down on protecting the nation against al-Qaeda and those organizations who are affiliated with al-Qaeda.
You wanted to protect American citizens from terrorists all over the world.
Yes, sir.
This story is to surveillance law what Abu Ghraib was to prisoner law.
We told George Washington University law professor Jonathan Turley of the allegations of the two whistleblowers, and he says there needs to be a full investigation.
This is not supposed to happen. When you're talking about not just the interception of a very high number of citizens calling the United States, but the casual use of these calls, even for recreation, is mind-blowing.
The two former intercept operators both say their military and civilian superiors would find ways to get approval from NSA officials and lawyers at Fort Meade, Maryland.
With their justification, it's legal.
Even an American citizen having a conversation with his wife?
The way the laws are written, if approved by the agency's lawyers, it's technically legal.
Adrian Kinney says a superior officer who personally briefed General Hayden at Fort Gordon rebuffed her questions about the legality of listening to Americans.
It was just always that, you know, your job is not to question, your job is to collect and pass on the information.
In a statement, a spokesperson for General Hayden said, at NSA the law was followed assiduously. The notion that General Hayden sanctioned or tolerated illegalities of any sort is ridiculous on its face.
He's the one who ordered the operation in the first place.
In a book on the NSA to be published next week, The Shadow Factory, investigative journalist James Bamford recounts the stories of the two former intercept operators.
This is very rare for two people to allow me to use their names and to quote them directly in my book. And the reason for it was because both of them felt that what they were doing was illegal and improper and immoral and shouldn't be done. And that's what forces whistleblowers. That's what forces people to talk.
The intercept operators say sometimes the eavesdropping did provide important intelligence for U.S. troops in Baghdad.
IEDs were disarmed before they exploded. That people who were intending to harm U.S. forces were captured ahead of time.
But Falk and Kinney say the prospect that they could do good in the job, find the terrorist needle in the haystack, underscores the problem with spending so much time listening to Americans talk to Americans about their private lives.
By casting the net so wide and continuing to collect on Americans and aid organizations, it's almost like they're making the haystack bigger, and it's harder to find that piece of information that might be actually useful to somebody. You're actually hurting our ability to effectively protect our national security.